Welcome to the Her First podcast, a platform to help online business owners, coaches, and creators gain the confidence needed to build a successful business while creating a sustainable lifestyle balance. We are here to help you prioritize yourself in business and life. I'm Joanna Newton.
And I'm Michelle Puolani. In this podcast, along with the Her First Collective, you can engage in the challenges women face in business, ways to increase your impact or income online, and how to make it all work while launching, scaling, or maintaining. Spoiler, it's not about perfectionism, hustling, or a copy-paste methodology. Let's dive in. Have you ever been ready to do something, launch something, pitch something, or create something? And then this sneaky feeling creeps in. Maybe slight at first, then perhaps it grows louder, larger, and soon completely eclipses any of your initial excitement. Typically, these are feelings of doubt, insecurity, or limitations that take over your thoughts, crippling your ability to take the action you know you want to or need to do to reach your goals. So if you feel like you've set out to do something big before, but then there's this almost invisible force field holding you back from reaching your full potential or seeing it come to fruition, get ready to kick that pattern to the curb, because today we've got a special guest who's here to help you crush those mental roadblocks and unleash your personal power. Hello and welcome back to Her First, prioritizing you in business and life, where today we have an exciting discussion planned with Megan Blacksmith, the co-founder of Zesty and a true mindset ninja. Hi, Megan, and welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
So Megan isn't just your average holistic health coach. She's also a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, speaker, NLP trainer. So with her unique blend of expertise, she's on a mission to equip you with the tools for faster inner transformation without all the self-sabotage along the way. Through her Becoming Zesty podcast and her innovative approach known as functional NLP, Megan empowers coaches, practitioners, and leaders just like you to release limiting beliefs and step into your greatness with confidence and clarity. So if you're ready to silence the inner critic and elevate your mindset to unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. Let's start with a little more background on you, Megan. If you could just tell us a little bit more about you and what it is that you do.
Of course. Well, I want to take you back a little bit to when I was pregnant. My daughter is now 13 years old, which is crazy. I can't believe I have a teenager. And when I was pregnant with her, I was equally so beyond excited. I knew I was meant to have kids and equally just scared out of my mind. So I grew up in a family, like I like to say, it's a little cookie cutter family in New Hampshire. My dad had a hardware store. My mom stayed at home with us, right? All the things. Everything was good. I didn't have big T trauma. I had resources. I had love. And so I had everything I needed. And yet, when I became a teenager in college, I rebelled so hard. Like all the things, all the areas I was like, oh, drinking alcohol, that seems fun. Drugs, those seem fun. Oh, men, right? Like shoplifting, the things that I do not want my children to do. And so here I am, pregnant with my first child, thinking if I had, I'm doing air quotes, good family and this great environment growing up, and I did that stuff, I was like, how am I going to bring this human into the world and give her a good start? Like, how is this going to work out? Because not only was I not as stable at all as my parents, my husband and I at the time we split up for the first year when she was born. We had a crazy situation where we were officially homeless when I was having her in the hospital. Of course, we found a place to live, but we had been kicked out of where we were living and moved into all of our stuff into a storage 12 hours before she's born. So I'm like, this girl came into chaos. All I could think was like, how is this going to work? Like I wanted the best thing ever for her. I was meant to be a mom. And I was just really struggling with how I could provide that when I had everything provided for me and I did the stuff I did. So I did what every good mom would do. I called it intuitive healer. I'm kidding, not kidding. Well, that is what I ended up doing. I was like, I don't know what to do. This amazing woman was referred to me by a friend and I had a call with her and I just dumped everything I was thinking. I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how to provide a good foundation. And as I'm telling her all the horrible stuff I did and that I don't want my daughter and now two daughters to do, she just stopped me. She's like, stop. Megan, stop. Stop right there. She's like, you did all those things, so your daughter doesn't have to. And like I'm still hanging on to those words. Like it gave me full body chills, and I knew it. I knew it to be true. I knew I was moving into a different age, and I knew for whatever reason I had to learn all those things the hard way, and I had lots and lots of lessons from them. So that became the pattern in my life of I did things the hard way so other people don't do. And I've applied that now to business. I started in health. I started in functional medicine because my own health crashed out after having that lovely daughter. And then I found a world and a way to bring myself back to wholeness that didn't require conventional medicine because I was being told, all your labs are normal, when I felt like I was dying. I felt like I wanted to break my arm not to go to work. I was having anxiety attacks. So I found this I had the struggle, and then I found a way that worked for me and created a business out of that. And then the next life unfolding of really big struggle me with my husband, and I found like the next struggle I was in, that's when I found NLP, so neuro linguistic programming and hypnosis, and the world that brought to me that our thoughts create things and our beliefs create our reality, and this was being opened up to me. We started adding that into our holistic health practice and saw people having super rapid transformation when they had been plateauing, when they had been stuck, because there was some belief there, some belief maybe around I'm not worthy of healing, or nothing works for me, or who will I be if I get better when this has been my identity. There were these really, really strong beliefs. And so finding that, then my business partner and I were like, oh, this is what's missing from medicine, and even functional medicine, is the power of what's going on in between our ears, how these situations growing up, these things that we put into categories, these significant emotional events, these beliefs that we get from like 0 to 7 years old, just teeny tiny little humans taking these on, how much they are shaping our current reality. So I went from that to how I support my daughters is now how I support my clients, and helping women, people in business, entrepreneurs, online coaches, usually that have a gift and are holding it back a little bit. There's some belief, there's something there that's keeping them from the next level, and they know it.
Thank you for sharing that story. And the truth is, I wasn't sure exactly what to expect from today's conversation. I think it's going to be really interesting because some of what you're talking about, I'm like right in the middle of that sort of journey. I've had health issues for well over a year now. I was working with a traditional medical doctor, working through things, got nowhere. My labs weren't normal, but there was like no solution other than medication. It was like, well, we can just medicate you and it'll make you better, but it won't actually make you better because you'll have to be on that medicine forever. So I've started working with a functional medicine doctor, working on those things, solving some problems. And now in getting to kind of a state in my personal health journey to really work on healing what's going on up here in my brain. I'm like on the path, like kind of on the path you went on. I'm not quite where you are. So that's great for me today to have this conversation with you and kind of learn more about like my next steps. And I think when you're struggling with mental health or actual health issues, motivation, all kinds of things, there are so many things going on. And it can be really easy to just get in the pattern of thinking like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just be better? Or why can't I solve this? And I think there's very little common knowledge of paths to help people do that, right? Actually help people tangibly figure out ways to work through those patterns, work through those things. You know, your doctor is going to tell you one thing, a functional medicine doctor is going to tell you something else. Like there's more than that going on that needs to be addressed, right?
Oh gosh, this is so cool that you're in. I mean, maybe it doesn't feel cool at the moment. And to be in that and already having that awareness, right, that there is more than just finding the right protocol or the right doctor or the right plan, because that was me. And that's where a lot of the people who found us, because for the first 10 years, we worked in female hormone health and brain chemistry. People would find us after seeing 7 to 10 doctors. So it was the like, nothing's working for me category. And I was going to say, it's not that we had anything special. I guess we did have something special. And it wasn't like that there was one right way. And actually what we started to find was that the searching for right way was actually one of the most detrimental aspects of the people that we worked with. And I personally went through that as well. We had mold in our home, and I went through a mold detox journey, and finding when I finally stopped thinking, like I would get 2 months into a protocol and think, oh no, what if there's not something right about, what if there's something a little bit different, like a little bit better? What if I'm missing something? What if I'm doing, and that thinking and going down the research rabbit hole again, that was actually what was taking me down. And not to say that there aren't like some answers and some physical support that's needed, right? Like there was some baseline support. The thing was, I was doing more than baseline support at this point. I had some of the best, we had some of the best doctors and practitioners on our podcast, and my business partner is a functional MD. Like I had support around me. It was more questioning, will this work? So it's like the 2 inches from gold. You get close and then you switch protocols, right? Like right when maybe it would start to work. And so this pattern of looking for the best thing, and this is not just health, this is in business, totally in business. The pattern of looking for like the best thing is usually the people who were really good at school or they were good at sports and they figured out like there was a right way to get success. You work this hard, you get the grades, like you get the kudos, you get the pat on the back, and you move up, you go to college or whatever it is. Like that there was a right way, and that's how I was. Very, very good in school, like very good with the books, like with the tests, but it didn't mean I was learning. It's like I had hacked the system, but it didn't necessarily mean I had learned anything. And that same thing carried out later on of there had to be a right way. And so the people that have that pattern, I attract, of course, because that was me. They're really good at literally doing anything. Like I've had people come to me and say, I can follow anything. I could just tell if I have water for 5 days. Okay. Like they could do anything. They could force their body to do anything. And they did. The thing is that in that process, they're completely overriding the signs from their actual body of what's good for them, completely overriding any cues, and in the process, like following one's person's plan. And that was the struggle we often saw with a lot of the research in functional medicine being about men. Primarily, men are studied who don't have a cycle, right? So there's a big difference between men and women and what works and what doesn't work. And so then if you take this cookie cutter, like this is what works, like fasting works. I'm not saying it doesn't, just random example, but and apply it to women, it's very, very different. So what we do now is really cool because I actually don't really need to know the latest and greatest in the research, although we do love research. The thing is that what we've found is that when we take away the junk, so when we can start to pull away the baggage, the energy, the emotions, the beliefs that people have been holding on to for years, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, then they start to get tapped in to their actual self, their knowing. And we 100% believe like the body has the perfect blueprint of health. We just got to get out of the way. And so you don't have to find all the answers anymore, right? It's really, really freeing and simpler. And when I found that in my mold journey, when I actually, it was hypnosis. So I'd done physical things, but it was actually hypnosis and shifting beliefs I had where then my detox symptoms finally went away. And if I had listened to people around me, I had been told this is just how I would be for life. Like I would be sensitive for life. I wouldn't be able to smell an air freshener and I would have these headaches, and I don't. It's been many, many years. I just don't. And I don't believe that it would have gone away if I hadn't done the rewiring of my subconscious mind and had examples of people who had shifted. Because if you're told or we're highly suggestible, so we're like, well, okay, they say it's going to be for life, it's going to be for life. And so having these examples of people around us, having the stuff we've seen in our container, our trainings are 7-day in-person certifications. So they're very intense. You're in a different environment. Like people come with their stuff and they are ready. So the change that happens, I mean, honestly, I believe 100% in it, and it blows me away every time. New things. My business partner had celiac disease and she can eat gluten right now with zero effects. I used to have to like make sure that the bathroom was open, if she even got a little cross contamination, she'd vomiting, diarrhea. Like her mind has shifted to the point that she's now making the enzyme that breaks down gluten. It's just, we're so cool. Humans are so cool. Just have to get out of the way.
Absolutely. So many of the things that you said really connected with where I feel like my journey has come from as well. Having dealt with and managed the health conditions, but also what you said about showing up in school, being able to apply ourselves and think that there is a right way. I think this translates so nicely to the online space because I feel like there's a constant need for strategy and seeking the next strategy, the right strategy. You know, how we know Megan is I am in a next level coaching program with her. And a lot of the questions that come up are almost like, well, just tell me the right thing to do. Tell me the way that I have to approach this. Just give me the X, Y, and Z. Tell me the list. Give me the things and I will do them. And I think that this type of business ownership, this type of entrepreneurship attracts that type of person who wants to check the things off the list, who wants to just show up and say, I can do it. I can make this happen. And a lot of times doing so has completely forgotten that intuitive sense of self, that alignment, tuning into the intuition, tuning into that inner voice, that inner knowing, that inner wisdom that you say that we all have. And that's been part of my journey at this time as well, is getting rid of some of the noise, what's external to us, looking for that validation, looking for someone who is an authority figure, is a leader to tell us exactly what to do, when truly we have to let some of that go. Yes, understand the landscape, but still tune into whatever it is that's going to come through us. I'm in the same place of really, again, being in this journey of figuring out what that means and uncovering some of these things. So I'm excited for our listeners today to get to better understand and recognize when they have some of these things that are coming up. Like you mentioned, when people come to see you, there's this sense of limitation, this sense of not knowing exactly what it is, but knowing that there's something there. So I've seen in our group, in our community, shout outs to you, Megan, for successfully helping them overcome a limiting belief or get them past that point of being quote unquote stuck. So, what is it typically for business owners, entrepreneurs, and coaches that they find to be like, I just don't know what it is, but I can't do the thing that I know that I'm supposed to do? Is there something that you see as a common theme for those clients that you work with as kind of that underlying, okay, once we can get at that underlying thing, then we're able to move forward?
Yes. My favorite thing, Michelle, such a good question. My favorite thing is to come in when there's someone, a business owner who has some things working, some of them things working really well, but to come in, like I said, yeah, I do think I'm kind of a ninja with the beliefs, to come in and pull out like, what is that thing stopping them from the next level? Like there's usually something that is hanging out there that they're not really sure what it is. And the pattern, same thing with the school thing. The pattern we'll see often people who are really successful or people who are like, who go all in, right? They do the entrepreneurship thing, they do the online business thing, they're in programs like we're in. It's not uncommon that some stressor, trauma, significant emotional events early on did lead them to kind of have this very intense ability to focus. So some of the most successful CEOs had really, really, really rough childhoods, for example. And you know, the phrase like what got you here won't get you there. So it drove them. I know someone who had a multi-million-dollar company and he said, I did everything up until 45. I built this whole company in spite of my father. Every single thing I did was to prove him wrong. Multi-million-dollar company, right? So it got him to a certain point, and usually it does, like being good at the checklist, being good at school, being good at sports. So like it'll get you to a certain point. And then I feel like that's where the cracks start to come in and we realize that we can't just follow what someone else is saying. And maybe we can have success, meaning money, but we won't have fulfillment. And that's where I think it starts to break down. So it's accepting and knowing like, yes, all these things got me here. So we're not throwing it out. Ugh, you worked too hard and you need to get rid of all of that. Like that got you somewhere. And then saying like, now we're in a different place in life. This is usually the person I'm working with. Now we're in a different place. The pace you're going will lead to burnout, most likely. The physical body will start to let you know. I know a lot of entrepreneurs who are forced to take a year off because they forced it and didn't listen, right? The physical body will let you know, the mental body will let you know, all sorts of mental health concerns will come in to stop us. So we have to learn to listen, use everything, that fire that got us there. Like we're not dropping it, but we're also we're dropping the force. We're dropping the like doing it to prove someone wrong. And we're starting. So what we talk about in our trainings is like away from or towards motivation, right? So is it the stick? Like we're moving away from someone needing us to beat us with the stick to move versus like, what do we want to go toward? What's that amazing vision we want to create? Like, I want to have a retreat center someday and this amazing space that I can imagine that people can come in for even months at a time. Like, I'm going towards that vision. And when we can start to move towards the vision, then we're not running away from what we don't want, when we're not running away from failure. So the patterns for this, the highly successful, the achiever, the patterns that we see, the beliefs will be all different, of course. So some people have very common recently is that the idea that when things are going well, that the other shoe will drop. That's one that I keep hearing over and over. Like they're almost uncomfortable with things going well. So because there's something in their life that when it was going well, like it didn't work out or something horrible happened and they have a strong tie to that. So they'll start to mess small things up or just like, we don't really like the word self-sabotage because in reality, your brain is always there. It's always trying to protect you. So it's maybe sabotaging you from like the $1 million business, but it's actually there to keep you safe, right? It's doing something to keep you small out of safety. It's not like just trying to screw with you. Everything we're doing is for a purpose. And these things will come in where people will start to just like maybe not show up as much as they used to, right? Like when it starts to work. And then they'll have to wait until things aren't going well again. Like if the bank account, everyone will have like a different trigger, but if a bank account goes below a certain number or whatever it is that gets them back in gear again, like, oh, shoot, I got to get some clients. I got to do some things. I got to put my face out there. So different beliefs around what it will mean if they're really successful. I worked with a lot of people who have children. So I had a really strong belief of like, it's one or the other. Like I'm either a successful business owner or I'm a good mom. So being able to integrate that was really important in me recognizing I could do both. Consciously, I knew I could do both. Of course, I know people who do both. It was an unconscious belief though. So it was there kind of just hiding underneath where I would start to do really well. And then all of a sudden my body would. My business and partner and I joked around how like we would get so sick magically, both of us, during our launch. Like all of a sudden the whole body goes down. It's like we're flu and achy, whatever. And that was when we were still really, really we were actually afraid of our own power. Like we were afraid of success and like, what would that mean? And what if people come at me on the internet like this? What happens if you're seen? How many uncomfortable conversations am I going to have to have? That was when I really had to work through it because we do in-person trainings, which are really intense. And as we grow those, if you're like a 20-person training is one thing, but 100 people doing this kind of deep work, my unconscious mind was like, oh, that's not safe. That's a lot of potential whatever. And so I had to work through that because I could like you said, Michelle, I could have the strategy because there's all the strategy, right, in our program. I could have the strategy to grow and we had the numbers to grow, but they would not grow beyond the number of people in that container that we actually felt safe with. Like we could double our participants in a workshop, which you would think would double your people joining, right? It's supposed to be a numbers game. And over and over and over, if we weren't actually ready for a larger group, it wouldn't happen. And then the next time, maybe we'd have a small webinar, but we were really ready. We had like done the work of like sitting with our uncomfortable emotions, like having those conversations with people, really holding the boundary in the container over and over and over, having people push against us and realize like, okay, we've got this. Like they're just people. They're just in their stuff. We can handle it. And as we grew in that way and our nervous system could handle it, the group grew, but not directly with the numbers. Does that make sense? So it's just, there is so much more to the like how behind the scenes of our belief and also just our nervous system, like what we can handle as to how much we grow, that you can't really calculate in an algorithm.
One of the things that you've made me think of is, for me, I work with a lot of business owners, a lot of coaches, a lot of creators one-on-one to help them build their businesses from like a tangible, practical standpoint, not a, coaching holistic standpoint. And working with people, I find there tends to be a task or a thing that's so clear to me as a hurdle for that person. We'll be working on it. The project will pause, stall because they can't do something that in my mind is like the easiest thing. There'll be like a little task. It would probably take them about 30 minutes to like move the project forward and we get stuck. And I've never really actually thought about the fact, and I'd always be like, what's wrong with it? Why can't they just do it? Just get it done so we can finish this and you can have your thing and you can start promoting your business. You know what I mean? Like, just do it. But like thinking about the fact that, right, there's likely something going on that they might not even be, they may be aware of or may not be aware of that's making that task, that thing, a sticking point for them. Because you see it, like when I've worked with hundreds of entrepreneurs, right? And a lot of them will have some sort of sticking point that is like, okay, why is this the thing that's keeping you, from being successful? But it is. For some reason, this thing is keeping you from moving forward.
Yes, and it could be just like writing a page or something, right? Like it could, and for everybody
Correct.
it's right. So, I know I've always loved to speak and engage in learning how to speak better and speak on stages. So that one I've just been full force. Something about written, like when it comes to a written opt-in page, that's where I will like freeze. So it is funny. We'll have an area where you're like, well, really, you can speak on stage in front of hundreds of people, but you like can't get together 4 lines for an opt-in page. There is this limit often I think that we put on ourselves. And the cool thing about understanding language, and like that's the basis of NLP is like neuro linguistics, linguistic, right? Language is that we can pull out their beliefs. Like you could pull out their beliefs because they probably don't know it because you're seeing it like this. Okay, red flag, simple task, not getting done. Been 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever, something holding up the project. And it's a simple like thing where it seems like a small task, but then maybe they go on this whole like, well, first I've got to update my business card, to update my logo, to update, right? Like 80 steps get added to that one task. And so with their language, we can start to pull out that belief. So it's kind of taking them down, well, what will happen? What will happen if you do that task right now? And then, well, what will happen if you don't do that task right now? And what won't happen if you do that task right now? We can actually just use questions. Their answers, their answers will surprise themselves because they'll come out with some like, well, if I do that thing right now, then I would have 800 people in my webinar tomorrow. And you're like, okay, well, what would happen then? And then they're like, well, then I'm not really ready for that. My systems can't handle that many people. Or then I'd have, right, there's something underneath this. What's actually going to happen? What don't they feel prepared for with that? And it's just like a gatekeeper. It's just that little task that represents in their mind of like, I mean, some people have the fear of success, which I know is weird for others, and others it's like the fear of failure, meaning I will put this whole thing on and nothing will happen. And some have the like too many people will come and I'll be seen and called out and they'll know I'm a fraud, right? There can be all different flavors of it. But yeah, I love that you brought that up. It can just be a task that looks like it's not related. We always say the presenting problem, whatever someone comes to you with the problem, the thing they can't do is never the actual problem, even though they think it is. There's always something underneath. And so the language is how we get to that problem. And then language is actually how we deconstruct those barriers, the box that they've put in their mind around that problem. We're actually starting to break it down neurologically because there's a link of like, if I do this, it can equal pain, right? Maybe if I was too big and too loud and too good at something, maybe that's when people in the family yelled at me, told me you're too much. Maybe I lost friends on the playground because I was too bossy, right? There can be these ties neurologically to actual pain, rejection, right? They say like the where we feel pain of rejection And abandonment is the same thing as if we're actually getting cut, like as if we're actually having physical pain. So we will run and protect ourselves from that no matter what.
And a couple of things to pull out of this as you're listening is that you essentially, Megan, I like that you explained it this way. It's not sincerely self sabotage because what's happening, and I've had to reconcile this, is what's actually happening is that you are protecting yourself to the best of your ability. So your mental faculties, your subconscious, your way of being is in some way, from a nervous system perspective, putting you in a place of comfort. And so those things that you may be procrastinating on, putting off, avoiding altogether, or making excuses for and saying, like, oh, I couldn't do that, or I could never do that, or that's not meant for me, are often things that are outside of your comfort zone that feel unsafe. And so, as Megan's explaining, it's replicating perhaps something that has happened to you in the past or something that you are unaware of, you've never experienced before. And so that adversity, that sense of change, that newness can be really scary. And so it's presenting this to you in a subconscious way that then again, consciously, you're just saying like, oh, I don't have time for that, or that's unimportant, or, oh yeah, I'll take time for that later, or whatever that looks like and how it's coming out in your life. Now, to pull things back a little bit, Megan, for some of us, we maybe just be operating from our conscious selves. This is how we've always lived. Our thoughts run our life. We are kind of always chatting up top in our minds. We are always talking with other people. We're always receiving content, and we haven't really taken the time to perhaps get quiet, to tune into the subconscious, to tune into that inner voice, that alignment, and everything else. So I want to roll it back a little bit and just kind of start with the basic question of this idea that our beliefs create our reality. What does that mean, and how does that show up in our lives? How do beliefs create our reality? And how is it that someone listening is going to understand that it's not just their conscious self-talk that is the issue here, but that there's something else underlying that they need to address within their belief system?
So the first test is we get to look around our world, our environment, and just see, do we have what we say we want, right? So are the things in our life showing up in the way that we want them? And if they are, then cool, right? Reality is matching what you say you want. It's matching your conscious goals, and you're good, right? So if what we're saying we want, so if we're saying I want growth in my business, or we're saying I want to spend more time with my kids, and what we're actually doing is not that, that's where we start to look for that mismatch. That's where we start to find what is my actual belief, because like you said, they're hidden. They're not consciously there. Most of us out loud will say like, yeah, I want more money, right? We're not saying, well, that's not true. I actually know plenty of people who do out loud say things like money is evil and money doesn't grow on trees. But people in our world who are actively looking to grow and have been working, growing a business, building a business, will challenge all those beliefs. So most of us have done some work in that area, and we're saying what we want. And if it's not matching up, we just start to say, okay, what is the actual belief here? Because you say, like, how can our thoughts create our reality? Well, imagine that every second, every single second, there's 11 million bits of information coming in through our senses, through our eyes, our ears, our nose, or our taste. And actually, that number has gone up and up as we think about, like, now the number of like flashing lights. If you go to Vegas, for example, right, there's even more than 11 million pieces of information. So what I want the takeaway to be with, let's say it's 11, let's say it's 13 million, it's a lot. It's a ton of information coming in every single second. Now, our lovely brain is only able to take in, there's some variation in numbers here. Some people say 64 bits per second. Let's just say, it's low. It's in the hundreds compared to 11 million. So that's, imagine if I have 11 million toothpicks that I'm dropping from the sky every single second, and you all are each able to grab about 200 to 300. Like, that's what your body can take in. That's how much information. Okay, so what happens? There's a filter, right? Because you're not taking in everything. If we were, we would have to be thinking about the fact that my shirt is touching my skin right now and my butt is on a chair, and I would have to think about calibrating, looking through my eyes and seeing my nose, right? And like having to filter that out, but we don't have to do that because it's just automatic. So as these toothpicks are getting dropped, we will start to see the things that we filter out. So we either delete or we distort or we generalize. So we'll delete stuff that just does not match our belief system. So whatever's in the subconscious, it can come in. I don't know if you've experienced this, but you're in the room with another person and they see something and you see something completely different. And you're like, how did that happen? That looked like an old guy. And they're like, no, it's like a young lady. Like you see through your filter and you generalize and you have the belief like, maybe you were bit by a dog and you have a belief all dogs are horrible. So you were like, oh, that dog was snarling at me. And this other person is like, they love dogs. All dogs are great to them. And they're like, no, that was the kindest dog ever. So you're seeing through your filter. And that's how many of these toothpicks you can pick up. And so because of that, if we have the belief, let's just go with something like, I'm ugly or I'm not good enough or I'm not smart enough. And so then you walk into a room of a party and someone looks at you, and I'm sure people have had this happen when you're in a place where you don't feel like you look that good or something, and you're like, she's looking at my outfit. She thinks I look dumb. Right? Like we immediately create a story without even knowing the person. Whereas the person who's super duper confident, let's just say in their clothes or in their body, maybe someone is having that thought, but that doesn't even cross their mind, right? That they don't pick up that toothpick. So when we have the I'm not good enough or I'm dumb or I'm bad at systems or I'm bad at business or I'm bad with money, then the toothpicks we're picking up are things that match that. So we don't hear the 5 people who just said that was a really good presentation. We hear the one person who said, "Oh, you were a little unorganized at the end." And then that piles in for the evidence. And now we're actually changing, like, how does it change our reality? Then we actually change what we do. Because if you're feeling like you're a really good speaker, you probably go apply for the next thing. You probably reach out to someone to be on a podcast. If you feel like you're a good writer, you start to write the book. But if you've been pulling the evidence of how you don't know enough yet, or you're not good with money, then what action do you take? Right? Those beliefs will take the action. So the cool thing is that you can first change the actual beliefs. You can do this in either way though. So you could change your action, and changing your action over time will change those beliefs, or you can change those beliefs and then secure it in by changing the action. Either way, you have to do something. We don't get out of that. And we like to do it both ways. Like we like to do subconscious reprogramming work to go in and find the belief. Where was this formed? Where was the earliest time this was formed? Usually it's like 0 to 7 years old. Sometimes it's in the womb. We have crazy things that people decided in the womb about not being good enough or taking up too much space. And then we can rewrite that. And then their job though is to now live with the new identity. You have to go keep acting, and you have to secure that pathway in, because you have like a super highway to a different belief. If you have a super highway to I'm not very smart, then it's going to take a little while to put in the new pathway of like, actually, I learn easily. Actually, I learn well. So it goes both directions. But I think the most important takeaway is that you can shift these, and it can then shift your reality.
One of the most interesting things that I learned about like child psychology is the way you experience trauma, and that what you think happened in your head is what affects you versus what actually happened. So maybe I'm speaking from experience on this, maybe I'm not. But when something happened to you as a child and you go to your parent and say, this happened, and they're like, well, that's not how it happened. It doesn't actually matter. If I remember the traumatic event in a specific way, it affects me like that traumatic event. And I think that goes for like good things and bad things. Like what is happening in our brains and what's actually happening in the world. Like what matters is what's happening in our brains, right? So we can affect the way we see and feel things. If we think someone's going to be angry with us, in our heads, they probably will be angry with us, right? The amount of control we have is just really astounding. It's something that's hard for me as a mother, right? Because I'm like, what is she going to remember I did? Like, I hope that I'm doing all of these things right. And then, when you're thinking about the mindset and as business owners, on the podcast episode we just released today, though it's not the day this episode will come out, We talked about mindset in sales conversations,
Mm.
right? The mindset you have going into that sales conversation is going to affect the reality of the outcome. And as business owners, as entrepreneurs, if you want to see those growth experiences or you're in a plateau, taking time to think about your mindset is going to be so valuable for you. And as someone I'm like a doer, like I'm a like get stuff done kind of person. So thinking about my mindset has always felt like a waste of time. I'll just be perfectly honest. And some of the people listening, you might feel that way. You might be like, taking time to work on my mind, that's not making money. That's not making progress. That's not crossing things off my list. But it is, because you're going to get stuck at some point if you don't work on that inner self.
So my business partner and I have a joke where if we're talking about something that happened in the past of like, oh, well, remember how that went well or that didn't go well. And we always joke when we look at each other, we're like, well, it's like a 50-50 chance that what you remember happened or what I remember. And we're like, I don't know. And they say like each time we pull up the memory, we actually change it. So who knows what actually happened? And it doesn't matter, like you said, because it's how we remember it will be how it goes forward, which is so cool because there's some cool studies about that where people will visualize something. They'll visualize there was one I think around playing the piano and they just visualized playing the chords and or the scales. And then that actually changed in their brain as if they knew how to play and they had never physically played yet and then could play better when they learned just by imagining it in our mind. So we get to, and we like to bring that back to the physical body because we started in the physical body, that it's not just in our mind though, because every single thought we think has a chemical reaction. There's a neurotransmitter, a hormone, there's something released based on that thought. So it is changing then how your body operates, right? I think we've all experienced where you're really like freaked out about going on stage or you're freaked out about speaking and you like have to run to the bathroom, right? Like you physically have things move through your digestion because of a thought. Like you thought that, or you think about, just imagine you're about to eat a lemon and most people can have the salivating feeling just thinking about biting into a juicy lemon. Like all we had to do is think and that is released. So we say no thought is free. Like you might be like, I didn't say it out loud that I'm ugly, but if you're looking in the mirror and saying it to yourself, you're still having that chemical reaction. It is still creating the physiology, which then creates the behavior, which then shows you what you have in your reality. So you can address it from the thoughts, but you can also address it from the body, right? Like we can go both directions with it. And for people with kids, this has been the hardest thing for me, learning this kind of thing, because I'm like, in my 30s, I'm starting to learn about all these beliefs as a kid and rewriting them and like what they've done in my life. And I'm like, holy cow, like my kids are 8 and 13 now. So I'm like, and at the time, they were in the middle of this 0 to 7 and their subconscious is forming. I'm like, this is a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure. I remember my 2-year-old, I was doing all this rewiring, like of money programming. And I was like, well, if I'm doing all this rewiring, like, I'm just going to install really good stuff for her. So I would sit next to her and I'd be like, you are abundant. And she is just like the funniest little human and little mismatcher. So from that, everything I said, she'd be like, I am not abundant. I have this video where I was like, you have $1 million company. She's like, I have not no $1 million company. She's just immediately rejecting, but it doesn't matter because the subconscious mind actually doesn't even work with the word not. So she was still saying it. It's just cool to watch these little humans absorb this, because my belief and understanding is that if we can just be there for them, one of my mentors said, as long as you're there for them like 50% of the time when this stuff is going down, 50% of the time where they actually get to talk about it, share their feelings about it, you can just be there for them, that they will be able to write these powerful beliefs. Like they will have enough of that support. And I was like, okay, 50%, I can do 50%, right? Like that feels much more manageable. And like my story, you can have great parents and like a great growing up and still create all sorts of crappy beliefs. So I feel that this is just part of the process. I'm going to mess them up no matter what. I'm just going to teach them the tools. It doesn't have to be with me.
I think just the fact that we're conscious of this and aware of it is really important. So we're already bringing this up. And as you're listening, you're already starting to become aware of it. And that's half the battle. Half the battle is just knowing that this is an opportunity for you, knowing that you can dive into this and learn more about it, as well as start to strategically do something about it. Whatever that action looks like, and of course, tuning into what Megan is doing and finding other people who are working at this level on the subconscious reprogramming or the more habit forming and action taking, whichever direction you intend to come at it. And I actually suggest you take multiple directions and see what works best for you. But being aware of it and starting to own your personal power in rewriting your belief, because independent of where they came from, because there are lots of external circumstances in which they probably formed, whether that was school, peers, family, relationships, just being on the street, out in the world, social media now these days, how much access we have to entertainment, media, television, and everything else is all coming at you. And you're trying to process and understand and deal with all of these things. And of course, when you have children, for my niece, when this comes up, this is what I think about is giving her the ownership over her own belief system and understanding that she has the personal power of choice. And that's something that I feel like now that I'm learning as a 33-year-old that I gave away for so long. I gave away a lot of that personal power by giving into a lot of those belief systems and not digging into this a little bit deeper. So, yes, we're all going to have an impact on those younger people. And whether we, as you say, Megan, mess them up or whatever they kind of come out of it with, at least we can on the undertone, because I always when I'm with my niece, I try to instill, you are so bold for doing that. You're very strong. You're very strong when you do that, right? Do you feel strong? Or talking and using language that helps empower her in those positive ways, but also allowing her to decide how she feels or what she believes about things. And that's going to change and transform and grow over time. Again, as you're listening, noticing all the ways in which maybe you have given your power away because you either haven't tuned into the underlying belief system before, you've let yourself talk and kind of conscious thought chatter, whatever is happening, inner dialogue, kind of run away from you and you haven't really kept them in check, is starting to just notice. Like, give yourself the gift of awareness and start to pay attention to these things, because then you can actually start to take action and make some shifts and make some changes. So, Megan, as we start to head towards wrapping up this conversation, what are some of those shifts that people start to see when they start to address some of these things? They've uncovered their belief, they've recognized, oh, this is something that I'm dealing with. What do they see when they start to go through managing that?
They see choice, just like you said. They see that they have a choice versus living by a pattern or a plan. I know for me, I'm like, recovering from the peacekeeper, people pleaser. And I didn't really feel like I had a choice when people asked me if I would do something. It just didn't feel like that was a choice. So as I worked through the beliefs around, well, what would that mean if I said no? Who would I be if I didn't do what people wanted me to do? What would happen then? It's amazing what what happens and what opens up when you're not operating by those beliefs anymore. And you just, even like my husband, it's when he retired from the military 3 years ago. And so when he was first home and I worked from home forever and he's kind of in my space. And during the day, sometimes I read a book, I nap, I go to the ocean. Like I don't have what people, it looks like a classic job because some of my best work happens when I'm on a walk or doing nothing. And I knew that myself, but I knew he didn't know that, or I believed he didn't know that. So I found myself at first few months when he was home, I would like jump up when I heard him come. I would jump up from the living room, like go to my computer. Like, oh, people who work are at a computer, I think. Right. And there was like this whole facade and it was so freeing. Like when I finally dropped that and I was like, and this was not driven by him at all. He did not care whether I was napping or working. This was all my belief in worthiness. And I remember when I finally, like, realized, I was like, "Yeah, I'm napping, like, and I'm making money right now, like, watch me nap." And that part that I just said, it wasn't even coming from him. So like he was the one that was in my environment that then I was doing something different, but it was my beliefs. He's super supportive of me going to the beach and napping. So we act differently with people around us, but it's not even their they weren't even putting that on us. So it comes down to having the choice of how you operate, how you schedule, whether you say yes or no, because you're really just then operating from like your compass and not all these beliefs that were put on you or you absorbed. I mean, they're nicely handed to you generationally.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that this encourages our listeners to think more about what's going on in their brain, not just what's happening in the physical world around them. If our listeners do want to connect with you, keep track of what you're doing, what your business is doing, how can they find you online?
Yes. So the main spot is Instagram. We're at Becoming Zesty. And then our podcast. So those are the two places that we have content, every day on Instagram, every week on our podcast. Our podcast is also Becoming Zesty. That would be the place to find us. Depending on when you're listening to this, we do 2-day live events twice a year, August and January. So our next live training where we do 2 days in person, we go deep into habits. So habit formation through the 4 bodies, physical, mental, emotional, energetic, where we're really looking at why we want to change a habit and like the whole body, which then we get on board and the change becomes easy. It's usually like when it's not even really our habit we want to change, or we're doing it for other people or other beliefs. So that's what we do in 2 days, August 20th and 21st in Dallas, Texas will be the next one. Often when we're on podcasts, we do offer a free ticket to our live event. If you would like to do that, we say if people leave a review on your podcast within a week of it going live, we pick somebody to get a free ticket to the 2-day event. That is an option.
Amazing, Megan. Thank you so much. There's so much to this underlying belief system and so much that we still need to uncover for ourselves. And like we've said throughout this conversation, is that it's not about the right way. It's not about the strategy. It's not about just finding that thing, checking it off the list, doing the tasks and making it happen. It's about finding that internal knowing and finding the guide or mentor who's going to help you support that intuitive alignment, that inner voice, that sense of self, so that you can step into your own personal power, make the decisions, have the choice, and work from that place of awareness so that you continue to show up in front of the camera, in front of an audience, with your clients, in service, in your business, to the best of your potential, which is what we're all after, is that next level that you're working towards. And we fully support you in that. Thanks for tuning in. Find the link in the show notes to join us in the Her First Collective, a free Facebook group to discuss the podcast, ask questions of our guest experts, and network with a group of female entrepreneurs who value collaboration over competition.
Please subscribe, share, leave a review, and be sure to catch our next episode. What is one thing you can do today to prioritize you in business and life?